Boom, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. I see a lot of discussion going on about stablecoins, USDC or USDT. Now, I want to first off talk about, well, I guess just let's go with the idea of any stable coin. When we had Do Kwon on the podcast, one of the questions I asked him I thought was really pertinent was, hey, in all of the history of humanity, we've tried stablecoins before. We've tried it in the form of currency. And over time, the same thing has always happened. Whether it's corrupt governments, malfeasance of printing, wars, any number of things that end up in the inflation of the monetary supply, ends up in basically a degradation of that currency and a stealing from you. So its ability to be a one of one anything is actually lost frequently. So that's the first sentiment. When I asked him that question, he said, hey, that's a great question, because in fact, no currency ever pegged to anything has ever stayed stable. In fact, stability into itself is kind of a misnomer. Now, the US dollar has reigned supreme as the global reserve currency for almost, let's say, 60 years. Maybe you could go even stretch it out as far as to say 100, but somewhere around, say, 60 to 100 years. That's phenomenal. In the past, though, every currency has always failed at some point or another due to this inflation and this corruption of the monetary supply. One of the things that makes Bitcoin and the technology that surrounds crypto so important is that once you've set that code, the technology keeps its inflationary supply set. That means in the midst of a pandemic, nobody can just all of a sudden create 9 million more Bitcoin to curry the favor in the money supply that is needed for politicians to continue to do the stupid corrupt shit that they're doing, with people not getting as mad because they go, hey, I got a $1,000 check for gas. Okay, these are all problematic. Ultimately, we want to be in Bitcoin more than anything, but the downside is when you're dealing with volatility of the things that are compared to the stable, it can be difficult. You're looking at gains and losses that exceed most people's life, money generation capability. Anyways, besides that, in between the two choices, right now you have USDC and USDT. Now, USDT has been around for a long time, and they've managed to keep stable through whatever reserves it is that they have, actually rather impressively. I've been very impressed. Now, the USDT is rather opaque in the nature of the assets that are backing it, and this makes it less interesting to a lot of investors. Now, a lot of investors have switched to USDC. Our internal treasury, our venture model, had gone to USDC a while ago, just going, hey, there's inherent risk in all stable coins in USDT because we don't understand its backing, but there's an unspoken risk in USDC that a lot of people don't talk about. All of the tokens, effectively, that run on Ethereum are subject to laws that are much different than the way Bitcoin can just send back and forth. So at one point, if they wanted to, USDC could just go, hey, you're not allowed to send over X amount of dollars unless you KYC with us from now on. It is in fact programmable money, and it's not too different than a central bank digital currency because it's based off a central bank currency. Just happens to be the digital version this time. So in reality, all of these stablecoins are inherent into the same malfunctioning force of the US dollar that is bathed in so much debt. One of the reasons why they've had to print so much money is because for the amount of debt that they're creating, for every like $1 or $2, they get around 50 cents in US dollar growth through the productive nature of lending. And when you start to create more debt and less upside for the investment, you've hit kind of the peak of what that economy is capable of doing. Now, we're up against some extraordinarily strong forces in terms of inflation and deflation. Inflation coming from the government side of things, again, through monetary printing, policy, stupidity, from any number of basically dumb government nonsense. That's where inflation largely comes from. And then you've got these deflationary battles, the idea that companies are producing technology that allow people like me to make a video, upload it in high definition, have it go to thousands of people. That's pretty impressive. And back when I was born in the 1980s, I was dreaming of a motherfucking ham radio, thinking of 500-foot antenna to talk just to over was going to be frickin' cool. We have so quickly surpassed that the inherent nature of technology makes things cheaper. And so we've always kind of gone against this idea. So, well, where's the most safe asset? You know, I own property here, I grow food here, we've got 20,000 liters of water storage and a private well. These are all kind of intrinsic assets that when push comes to shove, they maintain a value, much like the pineapples that I grow over here. They maintain a value that is kind of regardless of the price. If you can sustain yourself and live, that's a huge plus. Just 40 years ago, this was a much different story. The technological advancements we've made in such a short, truncated period of time is actually astounding. So I don't think either of them are safe. Now, I actually like USDT a bit more because it's basically given the middle fingers up to the US government, whereas USDC is basically a central banker coin. Circle worked with JP Morgan and a whole bunch of the large world, I guess, confluence of investment banking are there around this idea of a USDC. The USDC is in effect a central bank digital currency. Same with the USDT. They are both versions of programmable money, and if at any point they had to or wanted to, they could stop those transactions based off the contract, as far as I understand. I could be wrong about this, but from my understanding is that they can do that. They have not yet done those things, probably because they would rather suck as many people in as possible before they close the gates and go, hey, well, now you got a KYC if you have over X amount of USDC, otherwise we'll just freeze it. And that's where these things could go. So although the idea of stability can be very attractive in times of volatility, the thing that we're looking for is the money or the assets that are least controlled by the social construct or the government construct. And this is why Bitcoin kind of stands out and shines as its own. This property here, if Costa Rica falls into political turmoil and there are riots and food shortages, this property's value goes basically into the ground of, well, how much are the pineapples and the water worth to live off of effectively. So we won't go into the nature of property value, but at least in terms of an asset valuation, it's bound by the social contract layer. Same with the US dollar. The US dollar is bound by the social contract layer. Their army, the IRS, the governments, and all the multinational corporations that have built their kind of flag and heading in the United States help increase the confidence that that US dollar, whether it's digital or not, holds some type of value. The downside is we know that inflation has actually occurred at such a massive rate, people don't still yet notice how much they've been robbed through that inflationary process. Now, as an example, pretty plain in sight idea, the US Federal Reserve goes, hey, we want to aim at 2% inflation every year. Now that means every year the monetary supply would increase around 2%, hopefully effectively creating 0.5% GDP growth, which is minuscule. But the problem here is that means every time the monetary supply inflates at 2% over the course of 50 years, that is 100% of your purchasing power that is gone. So in the 1970s, when they went off the gold standard, we have already lost over 100% of the purchasing power of those dollars. And when you look at it and compare it to silver, it's even fucking higher. In the I think it was 1960, 97, the Bretton Woods Agreement, when they went off the gold and silver standard and just became paper-denominated dollars based off the idea that the debt slaves of your country are going to pay back that corporate loan, well, the dollar has only ever gone down, whether it's a digital denominated dollar or a paper denominated dollar. That US dollar that was at one point silver is worth around 20. So it's not just 100%, it's almost 20 times the purchasing power of the US dollar since the Bretton Woods agreements has been wiped off the table. The idea that there's stability in the US dollar at all is actually a total misnomer in the understanding of what does stable mean? Well, if currently you're losing 20x the value of the currency's function since it was a silver coin, that's fucking huge, and it's not stable at all. And if they can just at one point come in and screw over USDT or USDC, whether it's through KYC or maybe lack of I guess, viable investment products inside of the USDT package, which is again somewhat opaque and we can't tell. The negative here still exists. The negative still exists that you're dealing with a currency that over the last 50 years has lost like 20x its fucking value. What stability is that? This is why asset prices are so much higher. Why a price of a house in the 1970s was $50,000 is now worth around 500 grand. It's the same thing. It's around 10x of that value has gone from the monetary supply and into other assets and spread across the globe because the US dollar is literally accepted everywhere. So where's the most stable? I don't know. We use USDC, but we're also very cautious. We know that the reason we invested in this whole sector to begin with is because the inevitable decline of a stable anything has always taken place. Anyways, Tio with the Arcane Bear, you know, I had told you I would tell you guys about the sunglasses, so if you made it through to this part of the video, I will continue to do that. The reason I like wearing these is because if I look at the camera, first off, there's a bunch of shadow in my eyes, so my eyes look blacked out, which just doesn't look good on camera. First problem. Secondary problem is there's a little screen over here to the right that you can't see that I'm looking at, so I know generally where I am and how I'm framed up within this conversation. And the only way I can get away with looking at the screen and you still thinking I'm looking at you is if I wear the sunglasses, because naturally you would assume that I'm looking directly at you in this lens, but in fact if you look at my eyes I'm looking over here, and the sunglasses obfuscate that. Shout out to Mr. Casey Neistat for sharing that one. This is kind of the secret why I keep this one pair of like branded TO sunglasses for so long. It's because they're actually very useful when making a vlog. Anyways, just a quick little update. I'm going to do a few more videos this week and the coming weeks. For all the private Bear Den members, there's some more updates coming. We've been kind of taking a break the last few months. I'm sure some of you have noticed just a bit of downtime. Looks like we're near a bottom, so time to warm up those spending hands and accumulate some more assets here soon as well. We're being very cautious though. There are some very large downstream triggers that could create a global crisis unlike we've ever seen. And although I don't want to bet on that yet, it's like lurking in the background like a boogeyman, like, oh, how criminal are the bankers? And maybe the answer is very, very criminal. Anyways,